Welcome to the podcast, Restore Yourself, Restore Your Marriage, where it's all about discovering the thoughts that get you in the mood, the thoughts that get you out of the mood, and how creating a deeper connection with yourself creates a deeper connection with your spouse. I'm your coach, Shelly Anderson, coaching you through life, love, and intimacy.
This is episode number 115, Why Your Husband Doesn't Want to Have Sex with You. And it might not be what you think.
Probably isn't what you think.
So true.
Can I take less than 30 seconds and plug something?
Yes.
This is called The Bread of Life. This is a book, and this is broken down into sections, and this is about Jesus, and this is out of the New Testament. These are his words, and so it focuses on the core of his gospel. We try to be non-denominational on our podcast, and those of you that listen know that we're members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. We don't push our religion on you through this. This is about relationships and marriage, but we do believe that spirituality is core to your relationship with your spouse. And whatever your religion is, we think that's a beautiful, wonderful thing. Check this out. It's at universaljesus.org. This is just the words of Christ. It's non-denominational, but it is the focus of what we believe is the core to a great marriage. And so we hope you will pull that website out and look at this book.
Yeah, it's getting excellent reviews. Okay, so let's dive into this. Some of the reasons our husband may not want to be intimate with us. So we're going to go through some of the real possibilities of why this could be happening.
And I'm here to shoot down all of your reasoning. Just kidding.
Okay, the first one we're going to talk about is that there are just ongoing challenges or problems in the relationship, right? This could come in the form of power struggles. It could come in the form of maybe he feels he's being criticized, that there's a critical aspect in the relationship. There could be built up resentment, just constant conflict or pushing things down. There could be anger, there could be frustration. So all these different things that could be a constant in the relationship could affect their desire to be intimate.
It's interesting because those are some of the reasons why a wife wouldn't want to be intimate with her husband.
Yes.
So don't assume that your husband just wants to have sex with you all the time, no matter what, and that he's nothing like you and, he just wants to have sex. Well, he doesn't want to have sex with someone he's not attracted to.
Right.
And there are times when we're not attracted to our wife, especially when we feel all this resentment and we feel blamed for things and we feel like you're angry with us and we lose our confidence because of that. That stuff happens.
Yeah, so true. So that's something to really consider, is that there's this kind of underlying ongoing issues.
Yeah.
Another one would be increased stress. And this could be having nothing to do with the relationship. There could be stressful situations at work. Maybe he's considering a change in his career. Maybe there are financial stresses that seem to be coming up to the forefront, or maybe they've been ongoing as well.
There's different kind of stress too. Because a lot of times when you're just stressed, we've talked about this on the podcast, the way that stress affects women is different than men. Most of the time stress will be a blocker for arousal for women, and for men, sometimes it's a release. Yeah. More than women anyway.
Yeah.
But there are different kinds of stresses, and when stress is really deep and there's a lot of worry,
yeah,
it can definitely affect the libido. It can affect a man's desire. And I'll tell you this, in the moment that you have been empathetic in those stressful situations, I may not have been in the mood, but the moment that you become empathetic, then I want to be closer to you. And so it's really easy for me to then have the desire.
Yeah.
But if you're not being empathetic and I'm just worrying, that's not where I'm putting my energy, is toward you. And I might be so stressed out that I'm not even going to, attempt to go down that road because of other reasons too. And all of these things overlap, all these reasons.
Yes.
Right. So it's not like it's just one or the other, right? They're not mutually exclusive. All these reasons can go together. So there may be some combinations of that stress with some of the other reasons, and I might not just be in the mood at all.
Yeah. Well, I think it's also interesting to make sure we recognize that just as much as the woman can be too much in her head, right? We can have too many things running through our mind, which will stress us out. And therefore, we find it a challenge to get in the mood. The same can happen for the man. And I think we can sometimes be too quick to dismiss that. But I think it's important in this podcast that we recognize that could be the reality for our spouse. And maybe sometimes it's not, but maybe it is.
Yeah, totally.
So it's important to consider it. The next one is a really important one, and this has to do with health issues. And sometimes I feel this is the one that could be the most obvious, but the most neglected, right?
Right.
So this could come in the form of medication. If our spouse is on medication, it can totally affect their ability to be in the mood. If they are struggling with heart disease or diabetes, those are huge contributors that affect a person's libido. And even if maybe they're not diagnosed with diabetes, like if they're constantly eating lots of sugar or lots of carbs, maybe they're in the pre-diabetic stage and don't even know it yet. And they could be feeling so much more tired and lethargic and not have that awareness that maybe they're headed towards that route. We know diabetes is just on the rise constantly, especially in the United States.
Well, think about the last time you were intimate. Was your husband really out of breath? Were they struggling to finish? Were they just completely done and wiped out after? Also think about the methods that you engage in intercourse. Is he the one doing all the work? If so, he may not be in the mood because he just doesn't feel like he has the energy, and he doesn't want to, put forth that kind of effort because the last time or every time you have sex, feels like he's going to have a heart attack.
Right.
He might just be out of shape. And also, you might not be doing as much work as you could when it comes to that. And he might feel like all that burden is on him. And he realizes that he's not in the best shape and doesn't want to feel like, he's a disgusting, sweaty pig on top of you.
Yes. I know that just, even from a wife's point of view, for me, my weight has a huge effect on my libido. If I pass a certain number in weight, I know it.
Yeah.
I can just feel it. And it wasn't always that way for me. I actually had to really tune into my body and say, I wonder if that's true for me. I wonder if there is a specific weight where if I cross it, it affects my libido. And I found out that there was. And so I think that is really something to consider for both spouses, especially if things are shifting and we're starting to question all this kind of, question their loyalty or how devout they are to us. And we really need to make sure we look at our spouse's health.
One more thing on medication. Another thing that can really affect a man's ability to perform is caffeine, right? That doesn't mean he's not going to be in the mood if he's on caffeine, but it might be harder for him to get an erection and to finish. So he might realize, oh my gosh, last time it was really hard or not hard. And I've been drinking a lot of caffeine. I don't feel like I can perform, so I might not even try. The other one is cold medicine. That is a big one. I know that when I have a cold and I'm on cold medicine, it's hard for me to perform. And I think that's true across the board. And then other medications, just look at the side effects of what medications they're on, because that might have something to do with it.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, the next one is that men can switch their arousal type over time. And we've talked about this a lot through different podcasts, but I think this is one that could just easily be ignored. Like, all men will never change, right? Our husband's just always going to have such a strong desire, and there's no way that will ever shift. And we're learning that, things can change.
They should.
And so if they do start to change, we have to really make sure also that we watch our thoughts when the change starts to happen and not just say, well, they must be having an affair because now he doesn't come after me the way he used to.
Doesn't mean that he can't start coming after you the way he used to again once you figure these things out, but we do change. Our minds change. We are constantly maturing in our mind, and our brain is developing still. Just because we're adults doesn't mean that we're not learning and growing and having our desires aren't shifting. Of course they are.
Yes.
That's supposed to happen. And that is also so that we can become closer to our wives.
Yes.
And so if you're just assuming he's going to be the same, 20-year-old that he was when you got married, well, that's something that is just not true. He's going to change.
Yeah. So it could be that they move from having this spontaneous arousal over to the more receptive and responsive arousal, so that the relationship does matter more to him, how things are going, the level of the connection. Those are going to become more important to him. But we also need to keep that in mind when we start to notice that there's that change there.
I'll tell you about me. I've changed a lot over the years. I am not as spontaneous. And if I don't feel like you are in the mood, I used to not care at all. I'm like, hey, I just want to do it. And
Yeah.
it was very selfish. And I let my instincts and my, kind of my animal nature take over. But at this point in my life, I'm in my mid 40s, and we've been through a lot of this, and we've really worked on this. And for my sex drive, it's changed to the point where if I don't feel like you are going to get something out of this, then I'm not as aroused.
Yeah.
Like the quickies don't happen nearly as much as they used to because they're not as fun for me.
Yeah.
I'd rather save it up for that time when we're both enjoying it.
I think this is such a fascinating point, and I really hope that everyone who's listening can really grab onto this, that this can be true for every couple, and we can't just pretend that maybe this is not what's actually happening.
Yeah.
That you want that fullness, that completeness just as much as the wife does. I think that's awesome. The next one is just having like performance anxiety or some fear about it, right? Like there's that pressure to perform, to be a good lover, that you're just supposed to know how, all the details of how to please your spouse, all the intricacies. Also that you're just supposed to have an erection and maintain it for the exact perfect amount of time. And so there's a lot of that pressure that could really contribute to how much you want to have it or how much you don't. Also, I think that what comes with that is maybe you're starting to feel or can feel like maybe you're a failure or that you're less adequate, or that something's not working quite right when things start to change and shift. And so all those things can also get you more back up in your head, right? You're doing a lot of thinking, like, I'm not going to be able to please her. Maybe last time didn't go so well. So you're more worried about what this experience is going to be like.
We hear commercials all the time about erectile dysfunction. And, we hear about Viagra and these drugs that are supposed to just kind of help men as they get older. I think I have read studies about this, but I think in general, the consensus is that most men who think they have erectile dysfunction don't actually have erectile dysfunction. It's all these other things that we don't talk about. It's the same story in all areas of intimacy in the media. There's one answer to this, and it's the easy answer, and it's simple, and you just have to take this little blue pill.
Right.
Well, the truth is that as men get older, they're not as sensitive. Their arousal isn't as sensitive. It's not like the wind blows and you get an erection like when you were 18. But things get more complicated. And as you get older, there's more responsibility. And as you get older, your blood flow isn't as flowy as it was.
Right.
There's a lack of confidence as you get older too, right? Just like women, men also feel less attractive as they get older. If you don't have a connection with your wife where you're feeling attractive because of all the reasons why women see you as attractive, right? If you're not telling your husband that you're attracted to him and telling him the reasons why, he's going to assume it's what the media tells him.
Yeah.
That he has to have a six-pack and he has to have perfect hair and all this stuff, right? And if he doesn't, which most of us don't when we're middle age and older, then we're going to start to lose our confidence. So as we're going through all these reasons why men have a lack of arousal, start thinking about ways that you can help him. And we're going to talk about this at the end, but all of these things should be wake-up calls for you to say, wow, how can I help him with that? Because we need help too, right?
What?
We do. We are sensitive, and the standard that we see in the media is to put men down. This goes along with feminism for the last, 40 years. But today we see marriage attacked, but we also see men attacked. And this isn't an excuse, right? We need to be men, but we're being taught how not to be men. And the way that we are taught to be men and have been taught to be men, even over the last, thousands of years, isn't the right answer either. But we need to find balance, and we need our wives to help us find balance in what it means for me and for your husband to be a man. There's not one answer, but we need to be able to feel like we're men and we're going to provide and we're going to please you, and that you think we're awesome and that you think we're the greatest thing ever. Because the minute we think that you don't think that, our confidence gets shot, because that's what the world tells us we should feel.
Yeah, it's so true. The next one has to do with boredom. And I don't think this one is going to be a surprise to anybody. We can just fall into routine.
Yeah.
Right? We can just be like, oh my gosh, I just kind of, I know if I do this and this, like this will be good enough. This works. This is the most efficient way to get things taken care of. It can also lead to, there's no mystery left. There's no fun or excitement. Also, kind of like what you said earlier, it's not worth the effort sometimes, right? Like if it's just going to be the same old thing, then maybe we're not wanting to put in as much effort as we used to in the beginning.
And this goes back to the combination of things too.
Yeah.
Let's say that I'm on a medication that, causes me to not feel aroused when the wind blows. And then on top of that, I'm bored with our sex. But I also want to be a good boy. And I don't want to go and look at pornography. And I don't want to go and cheat on my wife. I don't want to even look at other women.
Yeah.
I don't want to get my appetite somewhere else and come back to my wife. Right? These are all good reasons that you may not want to be intimate. But here, back to the boredom thing. Is it worth the effort to have just like the monotonous, again, comparing yourself to others that you think have better sex than you, or looking at media and like, oh, it's just not passionate. And, when we have sex, it's just like, wham, bam, thank you, ma'am. We roll over and, we go to sleep.
Yeah.
Is it worth the effort, especially when I'm on medication and I'm going to have to really work hard to finish? And my wife isn't really doing it for me because I know she doesn't like it. She doesn't act like she likes it when we're having sex. She doesn't show that she has a desire for me, right? I can go down the list.
Right.
Boredom encapsulates all kinds of things and many of these categories.
Yeah.
And if your husband's bored, it's not just you. Okay? Well, this podcast isn't to blame you, but it is to help you open your eyes to think, what might be going on?
Yes.
What are the things that might be going on? How do I change my thinking about this? And how do I change my perspective about him?
It's so true. I think one of our goals in discussing this topic is to allow our brain to become highly curious, right? Is to not get stuck in that rut, but to challenge some of the assumptions that our brain will naturally go through and go to. So we only have two more to discuss, and then we're going to talk about some positive ways to counteract these.
Well, if anyone is wondering if there's an answer to this, you should take the Intimacy Effect course that Shelley has on our website. This goes over all of these things, and I'm surprised that like millions of people aren't ordering this thing. Because it is so good, and it's not just for people who have bad marriages or bad intimacy. This is to help you improve it. The Intimacy Effect, Intimacy Beyond Sex, is a course on our website, and it's just Shelley. It's not me. I'm not even on that course. So if you just want a one-on-one with Shelley through an educational, online educational experience, that is such an awesome course. That'll help.
Yes, it will. Another reason the husband might not be as interested in sex as he was before is that he's realizing that their arousal and their erotic desires are not the same. So when you feel like yours is one, you want to have this type of experience, and you know that my desire is to have a different experience than yours, that can be hard to want to say, man, let's get into this, but it might not be fulfilling for me this time, or it might not be fulfilling for my wife this time. That can really change your desire to get into it, because again, it will go back to some of those thoughts like, I'm not as good of a lover as she might want, or it's not as pleasing for either of us at this point.
Or you won't let me love you the way that I want to really love you. And I'm not talking about anything perverted here, okay? Just hear me out for a second. When a man really, really loves a woman, all aspects of her, he wants every bit of her.
Yes.
He wants every piece of her. He wants to devour her. Okay? And you can think about this however you want, whatever that means. But he wants to be passionate. And that means that he wants to, kiss her in ways that are passionate and touch her in ways that are passionate and like the whole thing.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes women get uncomfortable with that because they're not quite sure what that's going to lead to or something.
Yes.
And I think that this is why communication before, during, and after sex is so important, because you need to know what the boundaries are, okay? But a man is going to want to completely devour you. And if you don't want him to completely devour you because you're worried he's going to cross the line, then you need to talk about it. Because if he's not able to do that, then that goes back to the last category of boredom.
Yeah.
And it also goes to a place of fear where I don't want to touch her like that because it might make her think that I'm weird or whatever. There's endless things that can happen here.
Yes.
And if your arousal categories and your styles are not lined up, or else if you're not communicating about them so that you know what the boundaries are, that could easily lead to, I'm just going to step away and I'm going to back up and I'm going to just let her control things. And I don't know what to do because my natural instinct is to just,
right.
Just take her.
Just dive all in.
And that doesn't mean intercourse either, right? Devouring you does not mean it's just intercourse. This means a lot of things. Make that mean whatever you want it to. But I mean, I like the whole thing here. Like I want to love her, but I want to love her in a way that she wants to be loved. And if I cross a line, then that's something that hurts me because I don't want to hurt her.
Yeah.
Or make her feel uncomfortable.
And I think that's such a good point, because I think a lot of times we might not consider that, like that you're holding back because you feel like it's going to be intrusive and hurtful, and but I agree that communication is going to be so valuable when it comes to this. And I think also that maybe another reason that there is a shift in the desire could be that we're making assumptions too, that maybe there is no room for improving things, or we just assume our spouse won't be open to trying something new because even the conversation is difficult.
Yeah.
And so, or we could assume that my wife would just say no to this. And so we kind of make the assumption that they're going to say no to everything, when really they might say no to one or two things, but they could be open to other things, right?
Yeah.
So again, there's a lot of assumptions that might be contributing to this. Okay, finally, the last reason why a husband might not be as interested in sex with his wife is because his sexual energy is going somewhere else.
This is the worry that people often start with.
Yes.
And it is possible. We've seen it. You all know somebody who this is the reason why.
Yes.
But we made this last because this isn't where you should start.
Right. And this is the assumption I think that our brains are going to go to first, right? We're going to be like, oh, he's not as interested in me as he was before, he must be having an affair. Like our brain will do this. And so, but a lot of times we just need to consider there could be something else. And just because the sexual energy is being diverted, it also doesn't mean that he's having an affair. It could also mean that, you know what, he is spending more time on the computer, right? Like, okay, he's starting to watch porn more often. He is online more often. He is masturbating more now than he was, 5 years ago.
And look, there may be if you start with the beginning of the list that we gave you and go through, these are all reasons why he may not be interested in you sexually. And maybe he has tried for years and years and years and done everything he can. And maybe you don't even realize he's tried, but he's tried to be a good boy. And at just a certain point, he just breaks.
Yeah.
And he just falls and makes a mistake. Back to the book I plugged earlier, right? Like we all make mistakes, but the Savior, forgiveness, the atonement, the ability to change, the ability to overcome our weaknesses, right? We were all made to have weakness. And I pray that you aren't going through an affair. I've seen it firsthand in my family, and I've seen it with friends, and it is terrible. And I cannot even go to that place where I can understand it in my own relationship. But I know that there are other things that lead up to that.
Yeah.
It doesn't just happen overnight. It's not like all of a sudden someone just decides to have an affair. There are other things that lead to that. And so if you're assuming that and aren't working on the things that you could fix, it could lead to that. But like you just said, if the sexual energy is going somewhere else, get in front of it. Don't treat him like he's like the worst person in the world. Talk to him, love him. Men make stupid mistakes just like women do. And this is one of the mistakes that isn't as understood by women, the pornography and the masturbation. It's not a good thing. It's not right. It's wrong. Don't do it, men. But if you do, and if your husband does go down this path, love him and help him. This is not something that he's doing to try to hurt you. He's not trying to hurt you, right? It's everywhere. The temptation is everywhere, okay? So try to think about it from an empathetic point of view and love him. And remember, he can repent and he can be forgiven and you can forgive him. If you do this, your chances of him going to that final step of affair is much lower, okay? Love him through his weakness. And if you show him that kind of compassion, he's going to show you compassion too. It goes both ways. Like we both do things that are tragically hurtful to one another. And we're not trying to hurt each other, but we both are doing things that hurt each other. But that's the beauty of marriage, okay? Here's the good part. Going through things like this will bring you closer together. It'll help you understand each other in a way that will show you that marriage is the greatest partnership that exists in the universe because you can get through anything together.
It's true. And I think I'm going to bring up a point that maybe a lot of women don't think about. And I know for myself, I didn't always think about this. It actually never crossed my mind until we started talking to a friend of ours who works in the ER.
Oh, boy.
And we started to hear some of the actual stories of sexual experimentation gone wrong. And it was so hard to hear some of these stories and how a husband would come into the ER with some crazy things that have not gone right when they were bored and experimenting. And they would have to call the wife and say, your husband is in the ER. And of course, she's like, oh my gosh, he's been in an accident. He's hurt. Something is terribly wrong. And then they explain what the real issue is and how sexual experimentation went awry.
Like there's something stuck inside of his rectum.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
there's weird stuff happens.
I want to really throw this out because this is why being able to communicate about these things is valuable. Because we don't want our husbands to go down that road. We would like them to stay very connected to us. That is usually our goal. And so, but knowing that the lack of being curious about what's going on with our spouse can very much lead them to go down some pathways and roads that they probably never even thought they would go down. And so I pray and hope that as we're listening to this, that this sparks something inside of us that's good, where we say, you know what, I'd rather start those conversations and sometimes ask the hard questions so that I don't get that phone call.
Can I share something I've done?
Yes.
Just because we do weird things. Guys do weird things, okay? And I've never been to the ER. I've never stuck anything up, my rectum. But we try things that are strange. Early on in our marriage,
I know where you're going.
I'm like, I was putting icy hot on, like my shoulders or something. I was really sore. I'm like, oh, icy hot. Oh, it's like a cold feeling, right? It's like, oh, icy hot is I wonder what this feels like on my scrotum.
Yes.
So I started rubbing it on my scrotum because I was just curious. Oh, yeah. I was screaming in the shower, and icy hot is oily, so you can't really get it off.
And it absorbs.
And the scrotum skin is different than regular skin. And it burned so bad. I was literally screaming. And Shelly was just like, what is happening? And when she found out, she started laughing. She couldn't believe what I had done. But I wasn't thinking I wasn't thinking practically. I was like, oh, this might tingle a little bit. Let's see what happens.
Right.
We do weird things, you guys. Men do weird things. And, if your husband is in the ER and you get that call that he has something stuck up in his rectum, it also doesn't necessarily mean he's gay. It doesn't mean you need to talk to him about it. Figure out what's going on.
Yes. Yes. Okay. So we're going to give you some actual skills, right? Some different things to consider. If your husband is in this place where the desire is not as strong as it used to be. The first one is don't assume the worst. Don't assume that he's having an affair. This really challenges us to challenge our own thinking, right? If we're already assuming that, we need to say, you know what? I need to take a step back. It could be something else. It could be any one of these things that we've just talked about. We've talked about 8 to 10 different things that it could be. And so let's increase our curiosity and not assume the worst about our spouse, the love of our life. Let's give them a little bit of the benefit of the doubt. The second one is to explore all the possibilities that we've discussed. Again, one of the biggest ones overlooked is just the physical health and medications. Explore that. Say, you know what is your testosterone levels at? Have they dropped? Do we need a medication for that? Or how's your heart health? How's your blood pressure? How's the blood sugar? Really consider those from a medical point of view and look into them.
From a testosterone perspective, generally speaking, testosterone levels in men have plummeted.
Yes.
Over the last 20 years or so, and it keeps getting lower and lower. And there's a lot of evidence that it's coming from what's in our food and water and soda and all these things. But testosterone is a huge one that can all of a sudden hit your husband out of nowhere. And you're like, whoa, let's get your testosterone levels checked. Yeah.
So please really consider the overall health of one another. And don't just dismiss it and assume, well, it's not that. He's just having an affair that has nothing to do with health. Right. No, that could be a big contributor. The next one is remember that change is normal, right? Things change. Humans do not stay the same every day of their lives.
There is a season. Turn, turn, turn.
That's right. So just be open to that concept and say, okay, this could just be what's meant to happen next, is that there's going to be a shift in things.
They're supposed to be.
They're supposed to be.
Things are supposed to change. Just if you're aware of that, then you can tailor that.
Yes. The next one is take a little bit of time to approach your sex life together and say, you know what, how can we recreate our sex life from where it's been the last 20 years and just add a new element to it? Or what's been missing that we could put back in?
Oh my gosh. If there's one thing if I could wish one thing that comes out of this podcast, it's that people would learn how to talk about their sex life together.
Yeah.
I can't tell you how many guys think that the answer is blowjobs.
Right.
They just think, oh, if my wife would just do this thing, whether it's a blowjob or something else. If you're talking about it, you're going to realize together that the answer is something that you may not even realize. And it is going to benefit both of you in ways that will take your love life to a level that you can't even comprehend at this point.
Yeah.
But if you're not talking about it, it's not going to get better. It'll get worse, and you're going to make assumptions that are totally false.
Can I just say what you brought up is a really interesting and important point, because in life coaching, when we coach somebody, we always find out that they have this kind of mentality, like, if I could just change this thing in my circumstance, then everything would be great. Husbands do it and wives do it, right? If my husband would just do the dishes, oh, then I would want to have sex with him all the time.
BS.
Right? So really pay attention to your thinking, right? And for both spouses, if we think our spouse, or if we're wishing our spouse would just do that one thing different and then everything would be great, that is a trap for sure that each spouse falls into. Make sure there is adequate time for foreplay. And maybe we need to spend a little more time in foreplay, because if the husband starts to have a more receptive and responsive type of arousal, then foreplay is going to become way more important to him than it was initially in the beginning of the marriage.
Foreplay is the best part.
Foreplay is awesome.
It's my favorite part.
Yeah.
I love foreplay. If we could be in foreplay in that state longer,
Yeah.
I'm fine with that. I love it.
And also, I know you've brought this up before in previous podcasts, but foreplay can last throughout the entire day, right? You can start foreplay off the minute you wake up and then have little, moments that contribute to foreplay all throughout the day, which just makes the desire, more heightened gradually and in a natural way that would make it easier to be intimate later on in the evening.
For a man, foreplay is when you feel super, super connected.
Yeah.
Right? Once you have an orgasm and you go into that afterglow period, for a man, that probably doesn't last as long as it does for a woman. And you don't feel the same connection that you do before intercourse, like during the foreplay period. And if you can learn how to keep that alive, like that's the whole idea between certain Eastern types of intimacy.
Yeah.
Like Kama Sutra or the Tantra, right? Tantric sex is all about not releasing for a man and staying in that place for as long as possible. And I fully believe in Tantric, that philosophy or that methodology, because for a man to stay in that place before release and stay there longer, even for multiple days, it is a beautiful thing, and it's something to look into, right? Just look into it. That's not going to hurt you.
Right. Okay, the next tip that we want to give is approach your spouse and approach each other with genuine curiosity. Not like, oh, I better ask him some questions, but like, just be genuinely curious. Like, I'm noticing a shift. I wonder what's going on. Like, that genuine foundation, it really comes through. And
without blame.
Yeah, without blame. And
like,
also,
what's going on? What's going on with you?
Right.
Why aren't you interested in me?
Yes.
Well, he's not going to answer you if you're if that's your attitude.
Right. There has to be a genuineness there. And I think, again, a husband can feel when his wife is genuine,
yes,
and not like approaching him with, this blameful attitude, but also to approach this curiosity of trying to figure out what's going on with a lot of compassion. Mm-hmm. We're going to need increased compassion here, because sometimes it may be something that you're not comfortable talking about or you're hesitant to talk about. But if we can approach you with some compassion, And with that type of attitude and warmth, I just know that your response is going to be so much more truthful than just some generic answer, or I'm just going to say what she wants me to say so we can move on.
It also sets a tone of compassion so that when he is bothered by something that you're doing, you're in that place of compassion already because you're being compassionate. It goes back to the saying, you can change yourself, you can't change the other person, but when you change yourself, you give that other person a different person to respond to.
Yeah.
If you're compassionate, he's likely to be more compassionate with you.
Yeah. So true. So good. Okay, 3 more. If there's a change in your husband's libido, it's time to start working out the unresolved issues. As adults, we have the maturity to start thinking about things different. We have more control over our emotions than a 3-year-old who doesn't get their lollipop. And so now is the perfect time to say, you know what? This has been happening, this other thing for quite some time. Let's say we haven't been good on our finances for the last 15 years. We need to start addressing this.
Again,
it's time.
The intimacy effect, intimacy beyond sex, that course is amazing because it'll help you with these things.
It will. Okay. Now we have the last 2. Let go of expectations. Oh, this is such a big one. I think sometimes we don't realize just how deep our unspoken expectations go and how much they wreak havoc on our connection as a couple. And so if a wife is always expecting her husband to get everything right when it comes to sex, do it exactly how we want, approach us the right way every time, never make mistakes, holy cow. We're constantly going to be disappointed. And that's unfair to both people. And it's just not natural for our spouse to get everything right.
If you expect me to be perfect all the time, I know that's not possible, and I'm going to try. I'm going to try to be perfect for you because I love you. But when I'm disappointed and my confidence gets shot because I can't live up to what you want, like this is typical in religious organizations, and in particular with women. In particular, our religious organization, there's a lot of women who just can't do it. They just can't be that perfect wife. And that's so unfair to women to feel that way. That is true for men too, right? A lot of times women think, oh, well, I just can't be the perfect wife and it's all on them. It goes both ways, you guys. Men feel this pressure also. And so we're going to have a bad day and we're going to go somewhere where we feel like we're appreciated.
Yeah. And I think as we really consider, how we let go of our expectations and is to really realize that when we have these perfectionist expectations, they're self-imposed.
There's a reason why Jesus suffered for our sins and our weaknesses. Okay, again, I'm pushing this because I am just seeing so much of a lack of faith in Christ and in religion. We are losing our way in this society. And if you don't think that you're losing your way, that's great, but you need to be careful.
Yeah.
Because that is the way to have true love and compassion for one another.
Okay. So the last one is to bring new energy to the relationship.
Oh yeah, this is awesome.
I love this one because there's no set way on how to do that, right? This allows us to be creative. It allows us to tap into our own natural abilities, our natural things that we enjoy and what we can bring to the table. But it also can inspire us to discover something new, right? We don't have to just call on things that we're used to. This can really spark something in us to develop a side of ourselves that we have not spent a lot of time developing.
And to renew life this way,
yeah,
it's exciting. And talk about keeping the honeymoon alive. If your honeymoon's been dead for years, you can have a new honeymoon.
Totally. Like, how do you want to experience a new honeymoon, in your marriage? You get to decide that. There's no set rules.
Your next chapter can feel more amazing than your first chapter.
Yes.
No doubt.
So you could bring all kinds of new elements to the relationship and to the sexual relationship, right? You can bring playfulness. You can bring humor, like wear something funny.
Wear something funny.
You know what I mean? To just like bring something new and start off the whole experience with laughter.
Yeah.
I think we can just dismiss like that. That can be something so valuable for the sexual relationship.
I just had the most awesome outfit come into my mind. Assless sweats.
Oh, sweats without the.
Sorry.
That's funny.
Because it's ironic.
Yeah.
You know? Like, oh, you put your sweatpants on,
But
it's over. But then you put on your assless sweatpants.
Well, yeah, it's a whole new ballgame. I love it. So yeah, being able to be playful in a new way, bring a game into the bedroom, into the experience, right? It could just be a game that you've played before, but add a fun, spicy element to it or a funny element to it. So also going along with that is to elevate how your senses are involved. And of course, this is a really big one, especially for women when we are so in our head, but also for the men, as we've discussed. You guys can get into your head just as much as the women can. Yeah. So to be able to bring the senses back to the forefront and say, how are we using our smell and our vision, and what do we want to see? What do we want to hear during, our lovemaking time together? Being able to incorporate those things back in can really revitalize how we are feeling about the sexual experience. And as a final note, there was one time when I was pregnant, I think maybe with the second baby, which is actually our fourth child, but I had to go to my OB, and I was sitting in the waiting room, and they had the best comic on the door, and I couldn't stop laughing. I was like, this is the best. And it was about how another pregnant woman was getting ready to go to her OB appointment, for her pregnancy. And they kind of called her in at the last minute and said, hey, we just had someone cancel. Can you come in, a little bit early? And she was like, yes. But then she also realized she wasn't quite prepared and her hygiene wasn't where she wanted it to be. So she just ran into the bathroom and just took a washcloth and got it wet and wiped her vulva area up so that it could be clean and fresh, for her appointment. And she got to her doctor's office and he went to go examine her, and he's like, wow, you really took extra care to get ready for this appointment today. And she was kind of like, oh no, what's happening? And come to find out, she realized that she had used her daughter's washcloth, which had glitter all over it. And so she was nice and sparkly and glittery.
Oh, that is funny.
For her OB. So there's lots of fun things to bring to the whole entire experience. And just know that there's so much that each of you can bring individually with your own personality, your own creativity. And as you really challenge your negative thinking about your husband's libido or the change in his libido, you can really open up a lot of new possibilities full of genuine love and curiosity. Any other final notes before we send everyone off to their week?
I just want to add that just being curious and asking is such a powerful way to connect, because when you show interest in us and ask what's going on with a sincere heart and with a real intention to understand, it means a lot. And I think that we will be more connected because now we can talk, and talking and connecting is an incredible way to improve intimacy.
Yeah. So keep these assumptions in your mind, and also different ways to approach it throughout this next week. And if you find yourself in that situation where you've noticed this change, go into it with a lot of curiosity and compassion. Because remember, the more you restore this type of intimacy within yourself, the more you restore it with your spouse. Thank you so much for listening today, and we hope you will join us again next week.